What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I want to talk about a tool that I use every single day when trading, not only to find sniper entries within local uptrends or downtrends, but I've actually recently used this tool to predict new all-time highs incoming for Bitcoin. And I'm going to show you guys exactly how I did it. And this tool is the Anchored VWAP. So in this video, I'm going to break down what the Anchored VWAP is and exactly when and how to use it to make more money trading Bitcoin, whether price is pumping or dumping. So without further ado, I'm not going to waste any more time here. So let's go ahead and jump on into the charts and break down this insane trading tool for the CandleMafia. Let's get into it. So guys, here we are on the Bitcoin chart. And before we jump into exactly how to use the Anchored VWAP, I do want to talk a little bit about what the Anchored VWAP is and why it differs from the more popular tool that a lot of people talk about, which is just the traditional VWAP. Now, if you've been learning how to trade for any amount of time, you've probably heard people mention the VWAP, and that just simply stands for volume weighted average price. And this is a tool that a lot of traders will use to trade within the trend. And essentially the way this is calculated is it basically just takes the average price of an asset for that day, but puts more weight on the high volume candles. And if you're really interested in the actual calculation going on there, it's price times volume for each candle divided by the volume for that day. Now, understanding the exact calculation that goes into this is not necessarily dire, but I do think it's important to understand a little bit about what goes into the actual calculation before putting it into practice. But there is a difference between the Anchored VWAP and the VWAP, and the big difference there is just that the traditional VWAP will typically start at the beginning of the trading session. Now, if you pull up a VWAP on the chart, we're just going to go ahead and search VWAP here. You guys can see volume weighted average price. If you go ahead and click that to get it on your chart, you guys can see here it essentially acts as a dynamic support and resistance level. And one of the best ways to use this is in a trending market to find a good area to be looking for a bounce in anticipation of the continuation of that trend. But like I said, the traditional VWAP resets on every trading session and only shows you the volume weighted average price for the given day. But with an Anchored VWAP, you can actually select the anchor point that you want the calculation to start. So for example, if you wanted to get the volume weighted average price of just these candles to the right of my cursor here, we would go ahead and select the Anchored VWAP, go ahead and click the bottom of that downtrend, and you can see there is a little bit of a difference here, and that is because we're using the Anchored VWAP, taking all these candles into consideration, while the traditional VWAP gets reset at each individual session. But at the end of the day, these are very, very similar tools, just behaving as a dynamic level of support and resistance, again, keeping you on the right side of the trend. And you can see if I select the Anchored VWAP here, we could go ahead and click the bottom of this downtrend. You can see here we get the move to the upside, we come back down, we get a bounce off the Anchored VWAP, we barely front run it there, then we continue up, we get a big dump to the downside, we lose it, we reclaim it, and we get support once again. So it does just act as a dynamic level of support and resistance, because as we do use the volume profiles very, very often on this channel, those are great within ranges, but when you're looking for the continuation of a trend, it can be kind of difficult, and that is where the Anchored VWAP really starts to come in handy. So guys, now that you know a little bit about how the Anchored VWAP actually works, how it's calculated, how it differs from the traditional VWAP, I'm going to show you guys kind of how this looks on the chart and how price behaves with it. I actually used this tool recently to predict a big move to the upside into new all-time highs. Like I said, you could use this on any time frame, whether you're trading the 5-minute, the 30-minute, the daily, the weekly, it does not matter. These are always going to be important levels because they are volume-based. Now, before we jump into my exact settings and how you can actually use this to make more money trading Bitcoin, I'm just going to show you guys kind of how this pops up on the chart. If you click your Anchored VWAP right here, you could just simply select anywhere on the chart. Although there are specific points that I like to pull my Anchored VWAPs from, I'm just going to pick this random low right here, and you can see that we do get this line on our chart. And you can see it does act as support. We pulled it from here, price came up, and then we came down, lost the Anchored VWAP, but once we wound up reclaiming it, it did give us a big push to the upside. We tested it as support one more time, and the trend continued to the upside. And then even on the big macro retracement down into this big level, we slipped it, but once we got back above it, that trend did indeed continue coming to the upside, giving you that beautiful level of dynamic support. And you can also use this in downtrends, guys. I'll go ahead and select this high right here, and you can see we come up, we make that high, and then we pull our Anchored VWAP from the start of that high, and you can see we broke down below it, resistance, resistance, and again, this is going to be an area where you're looking for a continuation of the trend, right? If we break down below that VWAP, we may be able to get stuck underneath this and continue our trend to lower prices. I'll pull it from this low right here, and you can see we get above it, it holds a support, holds a support, holds a support, 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 continuation up, and then once we lose it, big drop to the downside. You get back above it, you play around a little bit, but once you get back above, you continue the move up. You get a front run here, but then you tap it as support before continuing your uptrend. And you can just see here, this is letting you know, well, hey, if you're going to continue this uptrend, this anchored VWAP might be the place to be looking for a higher low before continuing up to higher highs, right? Continuing that trend to the upside. So that's what the anchored VWAP looks like on the chart. But now I want to show you guys exactly where to pull this from to find key levels on the chart, to get good buy the dip scenarios or sell the rip scenarios, to get in on the continuation of the trends. But before we do that, I want to show you guys exactly how I have my settings. So to get the anchored VWAP on your chart, you're going to want to come down 1, 2, 3, 4 tools down, click the right arrow, come on down to volume based, and you're going to see it right here above the fixed range volume profile. You're going to want to go ahead and click that and just click anywhere on your chart. Now, when you first plot your anchored VWAP, it's probably going to look something like this. It's going to give you these bands. I typically like to look at the actual VWAP. These are just multiplier bands. So if you just go ahead and double click on the indicator, you can just go ahead and uncheck all of these first boxes on the first page. And then you're left with the actual anchored VWAP here. And I do like to change this to gold just to make it a little bit more visible on the chart. So now comes the question of where should you pull your anchored VWAP? And there's a few different places where traders like to pull their anchored VWAPs from. I'm going to share with you my favorites. For instance, I personally like to pull my anchored VWAPs from major highs or lows in the market. For example, here on the daily, you could see we made that major low here at about $74,000 and some change. So this would be a place where I would be interested in pulling an anchored VWAP. And then for resistance, I would really like to pull these from major highs. So if you're looking for support, you're going to pull it from a major low. And then if you're looking for resistance, you're going to be pulling it from a major high. And this anchored VWAP pulled from the previous all-time high here at about $109,000 and some change. This was actually how I was able to predict new all-time highs to come in. And I'm going to break down exactly how I did that. But the major places I like to pull from are at the bottom of a major downtrend, at the top of a major uptrend, or another place you could pull these locally are at the start of very impulsive moves. So if I come on down here to something like the 4-hour, you could see price started to get pretty impulsive here as we started to break out of the range and get a big move to the upside. So I would simply pull my anchored VWAP from where price got that aggressive impulse, as that's an area where there was a lot of volume. And you can see our anchored VWAP comes in here. You can just see how tactical this tool actually is. Pull it from that impulse, and you can see price gets above that anchored VWAP, support, and then at that point, you're in an uptrend. And then every time you come back down to that anchored VWAP, it does end in support, giving you higher highs to come in. So when we're trading in an uptrend, you're looking at this and you're saying, well, hey, I can't really pull a fixed range volume profile here because price is trending up. But if we pull that anchored VWAP, it gives you good buy the dip scenarios or long the dip scenarios. If you're looking for day trades or you're leverage trading out there, it'll give you good dips to buy or good support to look for new long positions in anticipation of the continuation of that uptrend. And you can see, even if I come on down here to the 5-minute time frame, price is clearly trending to the upside here, giving us higher highs and higher lows. And if you were looking at price ever since the dump to the downside, you could pull your anchored VWAP from that major low that you put in right here. And you can see, look at that, price comes up, you retest the anchored VWAP, you put in the higher low, higher high, you get another push up, you come down, test it as support, another high to come in, and you can just see how beautifully this does act as support. And then the same thing with resistance here. If we pull our anchored VWAP from the local high of this candle right here, you can see every time price comes in and plays around with that resistance, you get knocked back down, you retest it again, knock back down before a massive move to the upside. So anchor VWAPs are simply dynamic support and resistance levels that you can plot on the chart from a specific candle. Key levels to pull them from: major lows or major highs, basically just major pivot points on the chart, whether it's the 5-minute or the daily. And then you can also pull from impulses where price gets very aggressive. Other forms of analysis, looking at money flow on Market Cypher B is going to be key here, but it just essentially gives you those dynamic support and resistance levels. So guys, I'm now going to break down exactly how I was able to predict new all-time highs to come in on Bitcoin using the anchored VWAP alongside some other analysis. I'm going to show you kind of how to put this together with everything else and show you guys kind of a real-time example of like how you can use this. So for example, here we have our anchored VWAP from the previous all-time high sitting at about $109,000. I'm going to pull that right to the top of that candle. And you can see once we broke down below that level, we retested it as resistance before continuing the downtrend. And again, we get stuck underneath this, getting that big drop to the downside. But I do keep this anchored VWAP on my chart because this is such an important high in the market and such a major high time frame high. The anchored VWAP from this level is going to be not only major resistance, but we can also look at this on the flip side of that coin. Hey, if if we could get above this level and flip it to support, this would be a major level to reclaim to potentially invalidate the downtrend continuing, right? Because when you're looking at this, let's assume that money flow is coming out on market cipher B, and you have a bunch of other key levels of resistance here, which we did. For example, we did have the major golden pocket retracement sitting up here as well. So when we look at this, we say, well, hey, we have major resistance sitting up here, but as long as we can stay above that anchored VWAP, and if we zoom into a lower time frame, you guys can see how perfectly this level was flipped to support. We get above the level, we flip it to support, and then that was the only retest we needed to change the major downtrend on a higher time frame from a massive downtrend to a major uptrend. So we knew when looking at this in real time on the live stream that if we were able to flip this to support and remain above it, this was going to very, very greatly increase the chances of all-time highs coming in, because again, if we were looking for the continuation of the downtrend, it would be very likely that we would get the rejection from that anchored VWAP to then continue our next lower high before seeing another lower low come in. Now guys, remember, just like anything in trading, you never just want to use one thing. This obviously has to be used in confluence with your overall bias for the market, your other key levels. Are you expecting the uptrend to continue? So I want to be clear, this is not just meant to be, hey, if I flip this anchored VWAP, we're definitely going to continue to the upside. Context is always going to be king. But for example, if I come here into bar replay mode, you guys can see not only were we coming up to reapproach this key level of resistance, being that anchored VWAP from the all-time high, it's not just the fact that, hey, once we get up here, we're definitely going to continue up. You have to keep that overall bias in mind. But in this particular scenario, we had been waiting for that drop down to the $75,000 786 Fibonacci retracement with some bullish signals on market cipher B. We had the lower lows on our price action, higher lows on our momentum waves, giving us the idea that this bounce might be a significant low. And not only that, but we also had our money flow crossing over into the green on market cipher B, which is a very, very good sign that the trend may be able to continue to the upside if you could get that money flow to cross over into the green. So the bias here was already, hey, we are going to approach key resistance here at the value area low / anchored VWAP. So this is going to be key resistance until proven otherwise. But as we know with the volume profiles, if we reclaim that value area low, there is a very, very good chance that we could get acceptance into the range, making the next target the POC, and then eventually up into the value area high to fill that range in full. So just to be clear, you have to use this in confluence with your other forms of analysis. It's used as an extra confirmation, and it gives you the context of, well, hey, if we flip that major downtrend anchored VWAP to support, we're also getting accepted into our value area, which potentially makes you anticipate the fill of the range. And on top of that, you had the money flow coming up into the green. So you had like 3 things to look at here that could be calling for higher prices. And we just know the significance of not only flipping that value area low, but also the anchored VWAP. If we come on down here to a lower time frame and we play price forward here, you can see that we did wind up coming up and approaching that value area low / anchored VWAP. We smashed through that anchored VWAP, and now we know, hey, well, if we do get a cool off here, we're really going to want to hold onto that anchored VWAP as support. And if that is the case, there is a super high probability of continuing through the range and potentially into new all-time highs. And that's how we were able to predict that. Not just saying that flipping the anchored VWAP will send us into new all-time highs, but we had that pre-built bias of the money flow crossing into the green, the high time frame bullish divergences at the low, coming into key support at the low. All this together gives us the full trading plan, right? You have to have a plan when trading, and it's not just one thing. It's all these things coming together, making us anticipate that bigger move. And the anchored VWAP gives us that super key level of resistance to flip to support that comes in confluence with our already predetermined plan and bias for a continuation to the upside. But once you get above that anchored VWAP, you can see here at that point, we're saying, well, hey, as long as we stay above that anchored VWAP and the value area low, we can look for that continuation to the upside. And you can see price comes down on a lower time frame and taps that anchored VWAP perfectly, flipping it into support. And then obviously we did see that continuation up to the next target, which was the point of control of the range. And you can see that taps right there. And then we know once we're able to get above that POC, we can very easily see that continuation up into that value area high. And sure enough, we did get the push up into the new all-time highs as we were expecting. Absolutely beautiful here. And the anchored VWAP was a big, big turning point in the charts. And if you're able to find these key levels, they can add a lot of confidence in your predictions and your directional bias, just keeping you that much more on the right side of your trades. So guys, hopefully this tutorial helped you guys out understanding the VWAP and how you can actually use it to make more money trading Bitcoin. And I covered all this price action live on my daily live stream. So if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of our daily live streams, urgent market updates, or any of these other saucy free trading tutorials. And if you guys want to learn about any of the other tools that I use in this video and you want to learn how to make money trading Bitcoin, whether price goes up or down, check out the next video and the beginner series playlist on the channel. It's 100% free, so go check it out. And that's all the time I got for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Frankie Candles out.
Go at the top of the class on a roll, and it's time to run it up. Yeah, you know, maxed out, put the pedal to the floor. Hey, on the road, here we go, here we go. Yeah, we winning by a landslide.